episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And every once in a while, all three best guests are from South Carolina, like tonight. The Palmetto State.
Yeah.
Obviously, a very sad subject, but we are going to lighten it up here a little bit. Today, there was a parole hearing 30 years after Susan Smith was arrested and convicted for the murder of her two young children. Still difficult to look at this photo. And we're just going to talk about what we all witnessed at the parole hearing today. We've got a little bit of sound, and we're going to hear from a therapist, podcaster, a lawyer. We got all the bases covered. Without further ado, Sarah Ford, she was with us to watch the parole hearing earlier in the day. She has served as a legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017. She leads a team of attorneys and advocates to provide direct legal services to South Carolina crime victims. And these days, it seems like there are plenty of victims in South Carolina to go along. Gigi McKelvey, she is host of the very popular true crime podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis, one of the best names in all of true crime podcasting. And she's, of course, covered extensively the Lori Vallow trial and many others for Law and Crime and News Nation. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Roger Rhodes, a therapist in private practice in South Carolina, and he has worked with inmates in the past. So he knows a thing or two about the criminal element. So
you bet. Yeah. I really know about this subject a lot.
Well, Raj, then let's dig right into your brain here. We're looking at Michael and Alex. These guys would be in their 30s today. One of the things we heard right away today, which is no surprise, was, basically pleading from her attorney, saying that this is mental illness. What say you, Dr. Roger Rhodes?
It does not fit mental illness. And she willingly killed those two boys, and she's getting what she deserves.
And when you say it doesn't fit mental illness, tell me why. What is it about it that doesn't fit it?
Well, see, when you're thinking about mental illness, you're looking at a break from reality. There's when you're looking at mental illness. Okay, if somebody's mentally ill, their grasp on reality for whatever mental illness it is not connected. Your brain is somewhat disconnected, and from your mental illness side is the strongest, and that then rules your life. And that does not fit Susan Smith at all. What she was is she'd made a series of bad choices and was living with the consequences and thought she could outsmart the consequences. That's not someone mentally ill. That's someone conniving.
Yeah, and I think it's either David Smith or Tommy Pope, the prosecutor, said exactly that. It was just a very bad choice. It's a horrific choice. G Money McKelvey, you and I spoke a little bit via text, and you were telling me, and this is why I was interested in definitely getting you on here, that this is kind of the first big case that you recall and read about. This was, for those who do not understand, how big was this in South Carolina relative to, let's say, Alec Murdaugh, which is huge? This was pretty big.
It was as big at the time. And you have to consider this was pre-internet days. So our local news was just 24/7 covering this case. Everybody felt so betrayed. It's weird, but it's like, but not many people believed her right out of the gate either, Joel. I mean, I think that people wanted to believe maybe the boys were out there. I was in high school when this happened. I was in my senior year. And I remember from the first moment she strolled in front of the cameras, I looked at my mother and I said, she did it. I mean, I was worlds away from being a mother, but that little untapped maternal instinct in my body was like, if your two kids are missing, you're going to be on the ground, not able to breathe. And I never saw tears. And just like today, when she talked, if she squeezed one out, it was not for her boys, it was for her. But I saw a lot of wiping and not a whole lot of anything falling. Nothing's changed. Go back to your prison shenanigans. And, unfortunately now we'll see her every 2 years for this very same thing.
Yeah, and that's a big problem for the victim, Sarah Ford, which is your expertise. Someone here, let's see, Marvin's mom. Is there any way they can make it so that? And by the way, please send questions with the triple Q. We had the hearing this morning, so I really want this to be a chance for STS Nation to either ask questions, vent, tell us how you're feeling. This is a heavy case, but. From Marvin's mom to Sarah, is there any way they can make it so that they don't have to do this every 2 years? It's like re-victimizing the family, Sarah Ford. That's number one. Number two, yeah, it felt like we were kind of watching a funeral. I mean, it was really sad. I don't think people expected it. Your thoughts?
It was horrible to watch. I commented to some advocate and lawyer friends on a group text. I hear terrible things all day, every day as a victims' rights lawyer. I'm used to being a former prosecutor, former defense attorney. I'm used to hearing terrible things in court, but listening to what David Smith and the family and the other victims and supporters said was completely traumatizing to me. And I'm an outsider watching this. I was a kid when this happened. I vividly remember her with those tears. It was watching her today was like a flashback to her being on the Today Show, pleading for her boys. I remember watching that before going to school as a kid, and it just being, rocking our world down here, thinking, oh my gosh, like we have to find these boys. What happened? And then, the entire time she was the one that did it. But I'll tell you what really struck me today was how her lawyer started off his remarks when he talked about, today is about Susan. And I thought, yikes.
Yeah.
Like it's not about Sue. It's about what Susan did to these two beautiful boys and what she did to her husband and her family and the community. I mean, when I think about the law enforcement, all that they put into it over 9 days, it's just, it's horrible. And to see it all today, kind of 30 years later, was really difficult to watch.
Yeah, one of the more gruesome things that we heard was David Smith never could see the children because they're in the water for so long that no one thought it would be a good idea for him to see them like that. Water does weird things to the body. So, Stacy Rum or Broom here to Dr. Rhodes. Doctor, why would a mother do this if not mentally ill? Why would a mother do such a thing?
Okay. She had emotionally painted herself into a corner. She was having an extramarital affair. She was looking to move on with her life out of union. And the person she was having the affair with said, well, if there weren't any kids in the picture, then I would consider it. Well, he was just trying to get rid of her. Okay. But she took it literally and she said, okay, if I can figure a way to get rid of the kids, then I can go on with this life that I've decided versus the life I'm leading at the moment.
It is, as a dad myself, it is hard to wrap there's a lot of crazy things I've heard in my life, especially with my dad having been a psychiatrist, my mother a social worker, but taking the lives of your two kids the way she did, I mean, just rolling them into a lake, absolutely crazy. And Gigi, what she did next was almost as bad, especially for the times. She blamed it on a fictional black guy in a red Mazda. And this, I was reading, and I was saying this earlier today, I was reading up on this area, South Carolina, in the early 90s. It was kind of like a hotbed for the KKK still. Black people were particularly, scared and kind of running nervously through their communities. And then this woman pins it on the black community where every red Mazda is being stopped. Every black person's being questioned. I mean, it was really bordering on evil. Do you think she even realized what she was doing at this point?
Probably, because I mean, why wouldn't she say it was a white guy? And I'm glad they brought that up today, that black men that were driving a red Mazda from here to California were how many were yanked out of their cars and slammed down on the ground just because they were black and driving a red Mazda. And that was something that outraged everybody in this area when the truth came out. You may have your pockets of it. One of the big misconceptions about the South is everybody's racist. I've seen more racism in other bigger cities than I ever have here at home. But, everybody was offended that she did that, because if you think about it, even for the 90s, like you say, it was different back then. But I guess in her mind, it would have been more believable than some white man. And so I think that she totally thought about who she was going to say in her fictional world did this. And maybe she thought she would be believed a little more than saying it was a white man. But at the end of the day, just another layer of evil to her story. And the whole time it was her. I went down to that lake 2 days after they found the boys' bodies. I went with a very good friend of mine. He's dead now. But we talked while we were standing there about the weight, almost a physical weight on our chest, standing there knowing how long it took. Because I remember like a year later, they did this, or for the trial, I believe, they did a simulation of how long it would have taken that car to submerge. And you sit there and you think about the last moments of these very small children who really have no choice and probably very willingly trusted their mother to take care of them. And then she rolls it in and gets out. And heavy, heavy stuff. I'll never forget all the flowers and the teddy bears and the pictures. And it's just, to me, every time I cover a case where a mother kills her kids, it is the most foreign thing to me ever. I just don't understand it. But it's not always mental illness. Sometimes it's selfishness. And we see that a lot.
Boy, you said it right there. There you said it. It was when you put in the factor of calculated. How in the world could you be mentally ill and calculated at the same time?
Right.
This was solution-based decisions on Susan Smith's part. She did things that led to getting the boys dead.
Yeah.
And she still thinks like that 30 years later.
Yeah.
Well, what I got to do, what I got to say to get what I'm looking for.
Today is about Susan. Like that tells us what she's learned.
Every day is about Susan.
Right. Exactly. And I think what makes it just cold-blooded murder, as you said, calculated.
Yes.
She put those boys in there. She strapped in those two precious boys, but she had her wedding album in the car. She had her wedding dress in the car. You can't tell me. I've seen being mentally ill, using mental illness as an excuse is just an affront to people who suffer from mental illness to say that, because she was calculated. She knew what she was doing when she put her boys and her wedding dress and the wedding album in that car, hoping to just let me push this away and I'm going to start fresh. She knew what she was doing. Yeah. And I think to Gigi's point about, pinning it on this fictional black man in a toboggan in a red Mazda, she wanted to play that white lady tears, that victim, I'm the victim,
right?
And knew that people would, oh my gosh, what happened? And she played into
Hollywood. That. It had a Hollywood tinge to it. That's not how those people where she lives operate. They are not, even back in the 90s, they weren't racist. They understood black and white. They understood, but it wasn't the 40s. It was the 90s.
Yeah. By the way, Tommy Pope, who was the solicitor, aka the prosecutor back then, he spoke very eloquently today. He said that, to Sarah's point, that she did put her wedding dress, her wedding album, and said that if she could have, she would have put David Smith in that car too and rolled him into that lake. And I think it took 6 minutes. There've been simulations done, and it's, if you want to torture yourself, you can Google it, but you can see how sad it really was. Dr. Raj from Virginia Little with a big question. Why didn't she just walk away and leave them with their dad, Raj? It's the most obvious question. Why not?
Okay, I'll tell you what the answer is. Common sense.
Isn't so common.
It's not common at all. Yeah. Would that have been a healthy way to deal with it? Okay. Because David Smith's a nice guy. He's a regular nice guy. Does he make mistakes in his life? Yeah. But was he some evil dude? No. She had painted herself into a position and made terrible choices based on where she had painted herself. And it cost those two precious boys their lives. And I'm sure when she strapped them in, they were just being compliant.
Gigi, while Roger coughs, Raj, hope you're all right there. From Bree here, I don't think they had any intent on granting parole, just a media stunt. We can get to Sarah on that in a minute because it's required, I guess, by state law that they are offered or have a chance at parole after the 30 years. But Gigi, I'm curious. And by the way, Susan Smith was having an affair with this quote unquote wealthy man who did not want children in his life, which is the motive a lot of people think as to why she rolled the boys into the lake. But you were saying, which is kind of gave me the chills, that you were there a couple of days after they pulled him out. It is the John D. Long Lake in Union County, which sadly will forever be remembered for this. I'm just curious, because I'm like a visual guy. What is the area like? What's the lake like? Have you been back since? Is it something that people talk about in South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, everybody still talks about this case 30 years later, and not really in a. So she said that the red light that she was at took unusually long to turn green. And that's how the carjacking happened. We, not trying to be insensitive, but one of the common phrases around here is when a red light took a long time, we would say that's a Susan Smith red light because, it's dark at night. The car is going to hit the sensor and then you sit there. But
by the way, not to interrupt, but I am, because I read this. I thought it was really interesting. I was telling Sarah earlier, that light that you're talking about, she said she got stuck at a red light, and that's when she was carjacked by this fictional black guy. But I was reading that red light actually, at the time it happened, after I think 5 p.m., whenever it was, would remain green. So it never turned red. And they didn't figure that out till after the fact.
Yeah. I have not been back to the lake. If I'm not mistaken, they have filled in where the boys were rolled down. I'll have to Google it, but I think they have filled that in, and it's not a boat ramp anymore. It's just grass. I went down probably 10 years ago on my way to the beach house. I just made a little detour and went and still that wait, it's just, it reminded me a lot of how I felt when I stood at Chad Daybell's fence the first time I went to Rexburg and just looked across that field and thought about the evil that took place there. Just something about standing in these spots, that just, your mind goes to the terror and what these boys felt. But it is amazing. It's still a topic people talk about a lot. And with me being in true crime here locally, people will say, have you ever just covered the Susan Smith case? And I'm like, well, I mean, there's not much to cover now. But I tell you what, right now, I would give anything to give David Smith and his family a big fat hug, because what stood out to me the most today is, he's been fortunate enough to find love and have 2 beautiful kids, but the devastation on his face and the absolute raw pain 30 years later was so evident. And that will be with him until he takes his last breath. And that is one of the biggest things about the true crime world that we need to remember is the living victims. And when we stop covering these cases because they're not current, what they are left to pick up is never ending. It just, my heart broke for him. You could see that raw pain, just as if it maybe had happened a couple of days ago. My heart goes out to him, but it looks like he is surrounded by some wonderful, loving, and supportive people. And I know people that know him and say he is just the greatest guy you'd ever meet.
And he did say, by the way, that he thought about unaliving himself. Go ahead, Raj.
Well, one thing we've got to remember here, Union is where it happened. And Union is a small town located in the middle of nowhere in upstate South Carolina. It's not metro. It isn't even really close to anything metro. So these are just good people that have had to deal with something so horrendous, and they had, like small town people do, they come up and emotionally hug the victim. And that's what we just heard. They're surrounded these people. They're loving these people. And that was from day one.
Yeah.
And
Cindy,
it's something.
yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah. Let me jump in here, and then you take the baton. But this is your domain. A lot of people are saying, "Why 2 years? Why 2 years?" Can you address that, and then whatever you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's the law. That's the law. It is now, or it was then when she was convicted back in '95. Now, if someone is, is sentenced to life, it's actual life. If you're convicted of murder in South Carolina, it is a day-for-day crime. But the law changed after Susan Smith's case. So she gets the benefit of, once she hit 30 years to life, she'd be up for parole every 2 years. And this is something devastating, for these victims who, I don't know if some of y'all may have heard some of the cases that were prior to Susan Smith. And you had a mom who was 81. I think she was 81 years old. Her daughter had been dead for 40 years. Yep. And she said, I will continue to be here and advocate for my daughter until I am no longer here. And it just was heartbreaking to hear that. And I think that a lot of times we don't think, my world is crime victims, working with crime victims, representing crime victims. And so often we forget that they can never take that armor, that label of being a victim, being a survivor. They deal with that day in and day out until the day that they die. Even the defendant may serve 30 years and then they're released. Those victims serve a life sentence themselves. And that's something that we need to always remember and be mindful of that. I mean, it's just to see his daughter today, who never met these boys, the impact it's had on her life growing up. It's just tremendous. The tentacles, the far-reaching tentacles of violence like this, of this cold, calculated murder. It's incredible to see, and it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and that daughter is a woman, and she's younger than the boys by a good amount. So it just makes you realize how their lives were basically snuffed out before they could even begin. Thank you for this. I promise I did not ask her to do this. I promise. Just finished your book. I laughed, cried, and loved it. Carm's take on life really registered with me. Thank you for sharing her incredible journey with us. This is kind of book that after a day like today will help you get through the day, because Carmen's been through some stuff in her life, and it's life advice. So I think it's pretty poignant right now. So Gigi, to you, Tommy Thomas. That's a great South Carolina name. I wish my name was Tommy Thomas. Actually, people don't know. Oh, something fell over.
Yeah, I got a poltergeist in here, Joel. It's good.
Is that your cat, or is that
no?
really?
It just fell off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in South Carolina.
I'm gonna get the sage when we're done.
Yeah, we like this kind of thing. By the way, people don't know this about me. I worked at Macy's for a summer. It's a whole long story, but there was a guy named Thomas who worked in the men's department with me. And here we go. We got Tommy Thomas, the attorney, today. He obviously got up on behalf of Susan Smith. Susan Smith eventually talked, and he went on to say, look, this is one of the most complicated cases, and he's been doing it a long time. He referred to it as an incident, Gigi McKelvey, and then went on to say that this story is really a mental health story. And if you're trying to figure out a rhyme or reason, you're basically going to hit a roadblock. There is no rhyme and reason. And then he said,
wait a minute. That's crap. Wait a minute. Let me help you that, Joel. That's crap.
Well, Raj,
that's offensive to mentally ill people who definitely have issues. She's not mentally ill. She's calculated. She's evil. Now, is this a good example of evil, calculated people doing nasty stuff to just innocent people? Yeah. But is it around mental illness? Man, only her attorneys came up with that crap. That's what it is. It's crap.
Yeah, well, that's what this guy does. I forget his website, but it's like, parole something, like call me 1-800-parole, whatever it is.
It's crap 1-800 if there's mental illness. I'll tell you that right now.
I needed Raj today.
That's
so bad. Hey, if it looks like a duck, Joel, and it flies like a duck, it's a duck.
It is a duck, man. By the way, that's an Oklahoma accent for those of you wondering. That is no South Carolina accent. So Gigi, he went on to say that the story is really a mental health story. And he talks about the dangers of untreated mental health. I mean, we'll hold it right there. When he started to speak, I mean, he obviously has a job, but I mean, if I was the attorney, and I'm by no means an attorney, but I have some common sense, I would have started by saying, something like, we're here today because of Michael and Alex. It was a horrible tragedy. Doesn't even really address the children or what happened.
I don't think he mentioned their names the entire time he talked, and it was lengthy. And I understand he has a job to do. I'm not going to bash the guy. People have their things they do, but he didn't read the room. He definitely could have worded all of this in a different way. They can say she's had remorse, but when Michael gave his interview afterwards, he said, she has never told me sorry. She's never told me I'm sorry for what happened. And that speaks volumes, because even if he didn't open the letter, if she were truly remorseful, she would have started way back 30 years ago and said, I'm sorry, whatever. I get they have a job to do, but between him and the preacher or whoever he was, and the wife was putting the shut up hand on his leg like 10 times, those two, it just, I mean, it was like, no, she was like, one time I noticed a good little squeeze, and that means, honey, like, shut up now.
He was, by the way, so this is a guy that was there on behalf of Susan Smith. He was a pastor, I believe a pastor, and he basically, something having to do with the world of religion. And he basically said that he's been writing her a letter once a week, every week for 30 years. He got really emotional. There were some people in the chat who said it sounded like he was manipulated by her. Sarah Ford, you're a victim's advocate. This is a person accused of killing her kids. Do you think that she was possibly manipulating this guy? Because he seemed really passionate about freeing her.
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely possible. I mean, she seemed manipulative to me when she was speaking, just the way she was, the tears, or the lack of real tears. I think she said the boys' names once. She really talked about herself and not what she had, learned. So those were kind of some initial red flags. I mean, other than it being Susan Smith that's, on our screen. But I thought one interesting thing that the pastor said was, let her do some good things out of prison. And my instantaneous thought was, let her do all the great things behind prison. That's where we need good things to happen.
Right.
Her getting out of prison doesn't stop her, or doesn't, that's not the only way that she can do good things. There's a lot of good that she can do inside the South Carolina Department of Corrections. And I think that that's exactly the place for her. The real tragedy here, we've lost, this family has lost these two boys, never knowing what they would have done with their lives. And we're all here, and these victims will have to go through this every 2 years. And the thing is, to my knowledge, I think that she can waive this. You have the right to be, to a parole hearing every 2 years.
Wait a minute.
She's not going to do that because she is a self-centered narcissist.
No, wait. Did you just say she has the ability to waive every?
Yeah, and I've seen it done. Yeah.
You are. Wait a minute. You're not certainly talking about Susan Smith, are you?
Oh, absolutely not. But what I'm saying,
that's never going to happen.
She could have come across, to me, and here's the thing, I've done it all. I've been a defense lawyer, I've been a prosecutor, I'm a victims' rights lawyer. So I've said the things that need to be said in mitigation for my defense clients, and I've prosecuted on behalf of the state, and I've advocated for victims. But I think the key here was it was all about Susan. It was not about what she needed to be. And that was the fundamental thing about her lawyer. Her lawyer, he's done this a gazillion times. This is what he does. But the way that he attacked this and defended her and made her case was really startling to me as a fellow lawyer. I don't think that would have been my approach.
Dr. Raj from Top Cat
Yeah.
88. The questions are great. Keep them coming in. Does the panel think part of the motive? This is you, Dr. Raj. Do you
Yeah.
think she was, they talk about like, like Freudian issues or things in the subconscious. Do you think that she was really looking to punish and hurt her husband because she was stuck in a marriage, having an affair with this guy? Do you look at it that deeply or no?
Wait a minute. Stuck? Did somehow he took, metal things and drilled them into the earth to keep her married? All she would have had to do was get in a car and drive to the interstate, and she's out of their lives. That's it. Okay. He was not wealthy. He did not have an incredible amount of influence in Union. He was just a regular guy who got married to her under the promise of we're going to have a commitment. She decided to cheat on him and then do what she thought she needed to do to be chosen by who she wanted to be chosen by. This is about Susan Smith. It's always been about Susan Smith. Every 2 years, if you think she's going to waive that, that's hooey. No, in 2 years she's going to have the Susan Smith show again, and after that, so she's going to have a repetitive Susan Smith show as long as she's sitting in prison.
Yeah. Someone told me that the inmates aren't too fond of her. I don't know if that's true or not, but that she's gotten into some altercations there. From Mossberg Mom, I met at the Sarah Boone trial. And Sarah Ford, I'm going back to you on this one. Her husband was murdered. The parole hearing opened my wounds like crazy today. I think that's a really good point because there are many, many victims out there, and it doesn't have to be directly related. You could be driving in your car in Idaho today, listening to the news and hearing these sound bites, and it can open up wounds. I know you're not a psychologist, but do you agree with this? What do people do when they're kind of triggered by these things?
Absolutely. I think of trauma, and when we look at trauma that victims have, it's like a victim has been in a pool and they get out of the pool. And if I'm standing on the side and they hug me, I'm wet, right? I wasn't in the pool. I didn't suffer that trauma. I wasn't a direct victim, but I've got that water. I've got that trauma all over me. So I think that people need to keep that in mind when you're listening to Gigi's podcast and STS. We need to be very mindful of that because it can bring up those things that we've had. No, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a lawyer, not a counselor, but I've seen enough of these that it can be incredibly difficult, and people will find themselves after being exposed to something thinking, why am I feeling so low? Why am I having all these feelings of anxiety and all this coming up? Because it does re-traumatize you. And just think, for these victims, the anticipation of knowing they're going to get a call, in a year and a half and saying, we're going to prepare for this next parole hearing. It's just it never ends. It really never ends. And one other thing I did want to say is that I think a lot of times people want to say, give us the answer. Tell us why this mother did this. Why did she kill her children? Why did Alec Murdaugh do what he did? Why did all these people commit these crimes? We cannot rationalize the irrational. And I think if we're going into it thinking, well, there must be a reason, what we've got to, that's for people that don't have these problems and issues, that aren't the psychopaths, the sociopaths, the murderers. We want to rationalize that. We can't think that, it's a script here, or it's a tattoo that someone has on their arm that says, this is the bad guy here. It can happen. And it does happen. And it's not something that is, unfortunately, as we were talking this morning, that it's, it seems like we've got a wave of moms killing their kids or husbands killing their wives. It's real life, and it can be very, very traumatic. So self-care is super, super important.
Yeah. And one of the things you need to consider in what you're talking about, the bad people, okay, they're people have created in their life few options. Okay. When you have many options in your life, and that's part of what therapy does, it exposes you to more options so that you don't have to be traumatized. It allows you to slowly heal a wound. And so that's, we just need to be clear about that. when we get into therapy and we in that part create many options, that helps us get out of poor choices.
Mm. Gigi, to you, we're looking at the headstone here. Michael and Alex buried together. You look at those birth dates and years they died. It's so sad. 91 to 94, 93 to 94. As far as we know, I don't think anyone from Susan Smith's family was present to support her. Gigi, do you know anything, not to put you on the spot, but do we know anything about her family? If the mother's still around, the father, if they've been supportive at all?
I haven't heard anything about her family really throughout the last 30 years. And it could just be that if they're still around, obviously dealing with their grief, they didn't do it. They are, again, that wide net of living victims. And, but no, I haven't heard anything about them. It's a good thing to look into, but no, if they're still around, they've been very quiet since these murders.
Yeah. So the COE pulled a couple of sound bites. Let's play the first one. This is from the parole hearing earlier today. For full disclosure, my beautiful oldest daughter has a sprained ankle. So off to urgent care. The COE is going with all 3 kids. I had 2 dogs, and now back from the dog park, things hopefully will calm down. By the way, I don't know if I just said this because I'm losing my mind, but right after this, 7 o'clock, we're doing a show on Suzanne Simpson. She's the missing mom of 4, presumed to be dead. Her husband, Brad. Speaking of why people do stupid things, he has been charged with her murder. And we've got Dr. Lenore Walker. She wrote The Battered Woman Syndrome, pretty famous in her field. And we've got the former Bexar County District Attorney, spelled Bexar, which I never knew until I mispronounced it, and another prominent Texas attorney. There's not a ton of news there, but we're going to get a different perspective from these people for sure. But here's a soundbite from earlier today from the Susan Smith parole hearing.
Of drugs or alcohol the night that you murdered your children?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Your attorney talked about working with mental health. Is that helpful to you?
Ma'am,
Mr. Thomas,
I hear you.
Mr. Thomas talked about the fact that you were working with mental health. And my question is that helpful to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that you would be willing to continue with on the outside if you were granted parole?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Smith, your crime took a lot of resources from the law enforcement community. What, if anything, would you say to the folks who worked so hard to find your children if you had the opportunity to speak to them today?
That I'm sorry that I put them through that. I really, really am.
I'm going to hold it there. That's like a third of the way. Dr. Raj, she's crying, but like Gigi said, I don't see tears. How do you analyze this from your perspective as a therapist?
Please release me. That's how I analyze it. She is so full of crap. Oh, but it smells. Goodness gracious. It's hard to watch the Susan Smith show. When she was young, it was hard. Now it's hard. In 2 years, it's going to be hard. And she's just a fake. She's looking at what I need to do. How do I need to act? What I need to say to get me out of here. That's it. And I'm sure in prison, man, she's unlikable. And every chance they get to hit her, they hit her.
Yeah. One of the questions, Sarah, a lot of people are asking, how does she afford this attorney? She's been behind bars for 30 years. Is this guy appointed? Sarah, how does that work?
No, I mean, I think he's independently retained. I mean, you're not entitled. The state is not going to provide a public defender for you. So you have to, you can hire someone to represent you. And that appears that she's done that, or someone has done that on her behalf. Who that is, I don't know, but
maybe the pastor.
It might be the pastor. I don't
Wait a
know.
minute. Wait a minute. Let's not talk smack about the pastor.
Yeah.
That guy just has a lot of empathy.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't care if I don't know if she's manipulated him or not, but either way, a good pastor is empathetic about broken people. And so that's all he's doing. He's being empathetic to a broken person in hopes that she will get better. But as we all know, you can hope and it not happen.
Yeah,
But
that's for sure.
let's not smack talk that dude, because I'm sure he's got a tough job.
Sorry, Pastor, man. All right, we'll continue playing this. I want Gigi's reaction. This is obviously Susan Smith at her own parole hearing today, making the case for why she should be freed, which was obviously denied.
And I'm especially sorry to the drivers that had to find them. I wish I could take that back. I really do. I didn't lie to get away with it. I really did. I was just scared. I didn't know how I could tell the people that loved them that they would never see them again. I didn't know how I could tell David he couldn't see his son again. And I'm sorry. I don't know. I know that's not enough. I know it's not, but I don't know. I know those just sound like words, but they come from my heart. They really do.
Right. One of the things that we review is your institutional record, and you've had some infractions throughout the years, some involving the use of some narcotics. Do you have any issues with drugs or alcohol at this point?
I don't. No, ma'am, I don't.
I'll hold it right there. There's a little bit left, which we'll leave for Sarah Ford. But Gigi, she's also crying that, she didn't know how to tell her husband. Well, I have an idea for you. Don't kill your two kids.
Right.
Then you don't have to tell your husband. That part I found incredibly manipulative. Roger's shaking his head. But Gigi, what do you make of just this in general, the way she presents herself?
Just deja vu back to 1994 when she's in front of the cameras pleading for them to be returned and leading this whole country on for 9 days. No remorse. Maybe next time she can stick a little hot sauce on that tissue so when it hits her eye, she can get a few tears rolling. But it's nauseating. It's literally nauseating to me to sit and watch.
Amen.
Yeah. Hey, Raj, before I forget this, let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
What is, I'm terrified of prison. I go up for my parole hearing. I'd still be traumatized 30 years later. If I got denied, I'd be in the fetal position crying. What is Susan Smith doing in prison tonight, knowing that she's just been denied parole and she's got to wait another 2 years?
Hey, she gets to be seen 2 years from now is what she's thinking. Okay. And I love, I would ask, and it's interesting, of all the panel members, putting it in the category of smell test. Did Susan ever smell innocent?
No.
Mm-mm.
Never.
There's Joel, there's your issue right there. There's what the parole board's looking for, is a person coming in and smelling, giving the vibe of contrition. No, this woman isn't.
Yeah.
Sarah Ford, she smells the same way emotionally that she did in 94. Same thing.
Yeah. Sarah Ford, they came back with this decision almost immediately. Was this decided before it even started today, Sarah?
Is it bad if I say I hope so?
No.
I mean, certainly she is entitled to this hearing. She's entitled to be heard. She's have her supporters heard. The victims have the right to be heard, and they were. But it's disgusting. Like, I'm physically reacting to watching this again, where she says, I was so scared. And I'm thinking, your babies were so scared. Just imagine how scared your babies were. It just, watching this again is just, it's really sickening.
It's a whole lot of me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's all about me.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I've seen a lot of people in positions like Susan Smith I've seen some actual individuals who have been, contrite. I'm sorry, and
There we go.
truly remorseful.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is not it at
Yeah.
all, but not by any stretch of the imagination, not coming from her lawyer's mouth, not coming from her mouth, not coming, but bless the preacher's heart, not coming from his mouth. I don't trust it. I don't believe a word of it. And, we'll be here in 2 years again. And I doubt a damn thing will change for me and hopefully for the board.
Yeah. All right. There's a little bit left here. Let's play it out. If it becomes unbearable, I'll stop it. But this is her continuing on.
You had a recent disciplinary infraction just a few months ago. So why should this board think that if we grant you parole that you're going to go out and follow the rules and the laws of society if you do not follow the rules within the institution?
Well, this last infraction, I was trusted the wrong person. This lady contacted me and I trusted her. I thought she was going to do a documentary on mental health. And I really am not guilty of what they charged me with. And I have filed an appeal on that charge. As far as your question, I've never been in trouble before, and the things that I have been found guilty of in here have been just stupidity. I know I made a lot of mistakes in here, and I have learned from them.
She slept with 2 prison guards. She got caught with marijuana, bunch of other things. She got caught with a razor, which is contraband. Raj, in this particular clip, when she's asked about the most recent infraction, which was just in August, she was talking to a documentary film crew. Right away, she says, I trusted the wrong person. She lied to me, misled me, immediately pointing the finger. As the great Steve Cohen says, don't point the finger, point the thumb. And she didn't do that. That's no surprise to you, I take it.
Not at all. I mean, I love, there's a reaction to crap. And that's what we're seeing here. It's crap. It stinks. We got it. Move on. We're going to see this again every 2 years, And is it equivalent to the Murdaugh? Yeah, buddy. Both evil people. She's evil people. Put her in the evil category and hit the next button. That's what's going to have to happen. Is she contrite? No. Is she trying to convince people that she's learned? Number one, she didn't do anything wrong, according to her. Wow, I couldn't believe even that coming out of her mouth. And people need to understand she's changed.
Yeah.
But
she changed physically. That's about the only way that woman's changed.
You wouldn't notice her on the street. It's not that. It's just what we've got to believe is she can get out of prison where she's always been a problem, get away from killing the 2 children, and go out and be Mother Mary out on the streets of America. I mean, that's crap. That's not true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Speaking out of here, she'd be everybody. She'd find a new way, hopefully, to be evil and not get caught. That's her problem. She was evil, got caught.
We're going to get to David Smith in a second, but speaking of not true, what Roger just said, that's exactly what this guy Tommy Thomas said, Gigi. He goes and says, this is not about the love of another man. It's just not true. And then he goes into this whole thing that her own father unalived himself when she was just 6 years old. So she's been asking the question, how could he leave me? She wrote to Tommy Thomas saying, and I quote here, I lost touch with reality. I didn't understand if I let the kids go into the lake that I would never see them again. I didn't understand finality. I thought Jesus would take better care of them than me. A little contradiction there, because if you're thinking Jesus taking better care. But I mean, again, Gigi, zero accountability, no remorse. This guy had a job to do, but he didn't do it very well.
No, he didn't. And I mean, none of it made sense, because it's just not what we've heard anytime she pops back in the news. It's never for oh my gosh, like she's changing. She really understands. She got caught sleeping with the correction staff, so we got to move prisons. Just it just shows she's in a pattern, and I'm sure she probably said the correctional officers wooed her, and she was innocent. Professional victims never change, and I'm sure you asked about what she's feeling tonight, and I bet she's probably feeling sorry for herself.
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's feeling right now.
In Susan Smith's life, but Susan Smith.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you think any of the people in the world, certainly the people close to her, mean anything, you have not read the room at all.
Exactly.
It's all about, sadly, Susan.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what Michael said today in his statement, and other people echoed that. And it is the truth. And we saw it in live form today when she, started talking.
Yeah. Sarah, I know you didn't make the law in South Carolina, but so many people are questioning it. I'd like to know the reason the hearings are scheduled only 2 years apart. What could possibly, I mean, it is a very small amount of time relative to one's life and being rehabilitated. The poor family. I mean, why not every 5 years or 7 years? Why? It's just arbitrary, correct?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know what the legislature was determining when they did that. I do know that, I agree. I don't know what really is going to change within 2 years. I mean, it's possible that, if they were on, drugs or alcohol when they were, incarcerated. I mean, the majority of the people we're not looking at after 30 years of prison sentence. I mean, they may have been in for a year, 18 months, and they're up for parole, and then they're able to come up again and again. I think that the key here is that it is incredibly damaging to victims. I know there are some states that don't have parole; they've abandoned the parole model, and I think that. Obviously truth in sentencing is something that I think is really important for crime victims and for society in general. When you say 30 years or we say life, we should mean that. It should mean something. But it is incredibly traumatizing to victims, and you got to think all of these victim advocates and people that worked with these families to get them all there together, not just, the David Smith and his family, but all of those victims that spoke earlier, all of those these people are carrying all of that too. And it's just tremendous, the impact that these crimes have. I mean, it really is it's difficult to fathom. It really, really is. It's been a tough day watching this. It really has.
It really has. And Lakin Riley too. Go ahead, Raj.
I'm old school. I'm an old man. Okay. They used to kill people. That was what was the difference when they went to 2 years, they killed. They didn't have to worry because the majority of people that were sentenced to death died.
But Tommy Pope tried. This was a death penalty case, and the jury said, no, we think that life in prison is going to be the better punishment.
Right.
But I know that those people on that jury had no concept of what this means long term, what this means for the victim's family.
Yeah. Yeah. And he did. I don't think they knew about the parole. Go ahead, Raj.
Consideration of victimhood, of victims having to deal with it over and over. What the people in the legislature were old people from South Carolina, and they grew up with, if you did wrong, they took care of it right then. They didn't mess around. They just killed you. Yeah. And those are the people that made that 2 year thought, because they weren't thinking victim thinking. They weren't thinking of long lasting. They weren't thinking of running this, and they certainly weren't thinking it would be a show every 2 years. Times changed.
Yeah.
And life does mean life now. It does.
Shout out to my friend, Notorious Jules, who's in the chat. Met her also at Sarah Boone. 2025 STS going to hit the road. We're going to hit a bunch of trials and bring them to you live on the ground. So buckle up for 2025 as we move closer. Let's now listen to the more important people. These are the supporters of David Smith here and the boys. I'm just taking a look. Let's see who this is. We'll watch together and get some reaction.
On Michael and Alex's behalf.
For those who do not know, this is David Smith. This is the ex-husband and the father of the two boys.
And as their father, You know, God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do. She purposely meant to end her life. I never have felt any remorse from her for it. She's never expressed any to me. I never seen it on paper. No, she, as you've heard, she changed my life for the rest of my life that night.
Gonna hold it right there, Raj. This is a man that you do not have to be a licensed therapist like you to understand this guy has been just subjected to incredible suffering,
Yeah.
pain, loss. I mean, you see it all over him. I don't know how this guy goes on, to be honest, but he just seems like he's carrying the weight of the world. What kind of strength does it take to get up there and talk, on behalf of his two sons who have been dead for 30 years? And he also, I mean, he's really smart. He said, look, God gives us free choice. He knew that
Yeah.
this was a bad choice. What do you make of his whole presentation, the way he looks and all of that?
Well, I love that. What they're probably not showing you is he's moved on. Okay. He realized that the Susan Smith part of his life had come and gone. Okay. And that, wait a minute, the only way he was going to get better was create a new David Smith life. And that's what he's done. And so when you bring him back and he has to talk about this, it's very painful. And he's like many of us trying to make sense of a nonsensical moment. And I think he does very well at doing that. But I guarantee you, he's walking out of that courtroom. He's going back to his current wife, his current family, his current life, and he's being the best he's got.
It is just tough to watch. Let's continue to. I mean, it's amazing that he's got the strength to get up there and do this. I'm just thinking my own mother. And I don't want to get everyone depressed. Lost a son, and I always wonder, like, how do you just move on from that? She dealt with it in a totally different way, which is in the book. But it's everyone grieves in their own way.
Yes.
This is pretty sad. Let's continue to watch.
Some for the better, some for the worse, but what she did, not only to Michael and Alex, she came pretty close to causing me to end my life because of the grief that she brought upon me. But thankfully she didn't. I understand back in 95 that through the state's law, life in prison meant 30 years to life. And now that's different, but at that time, that's what counts. I understand that. But ultimately, to me, that's only 15 years per child.
Sarah, that's super heavy right there. And he's basically equating it to a 15-year sentence for each of his kids. This guy gives me the chills. Like, I feel like I'm watching like a 1950s black and white movie with like a really powerful moment. I don't know. There's something about this guy, David Smith, that's very powerful. I don't know. You've had time to reflect on it this afternoon, hearing this and hearing his pain, knowing the work that you do. What are you thinking?
Seeing his pain that we are all watching, seeing it's worse for me watching it the second time, Joel, than watching it this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Just seeing his face and just that angst and just the worst this is the worst thing that any parent can imagine. And at the hands of someone he trusted completely, the mother of his kids. I mean, the betrayal, the agony. I mean, it's written all over his face and the faces of his supporters. I mean, you even saw that in the prosecutors' faces. I mean, how they got emotional. I mean, I'm sitting here watching this and I'm like, don't cry, because it's just hearing things like it doesn't ever get easier. And it is just so difficult to watch and to see. You know, I don't think Susan Smith is in her cell tonight thinking about this. Not from his perspective,
Not at all.
not
Oh,
about her
not at
kids,
all.
not
Yeah.
about anybody that's, you know, those officers, the divers that found their body, the officers that were there when they pulled that car out. You know, this has touched so many people, and it's brought up so much for so many. It's just heartbreaking. There's no other word for it. I mean, it makes you just. Get
Denny
chills.
Dawn says this is real grief that we're looking at, no doubt about that. And Sarah just talked about the divers who had to pull these boys out. They were traumatized by that, as anybody would be. That's what we forget. These first responders, firefighters, police, they see horrific things. My friend Chief Chris Anderson wrote a book, Man, You're Crazy, and it's about helping law enforcement officials with mental health. So heavy night tonight. Let's watch the end of this and get Gigi's reaction.
Her own children. It's just not enough. So I'm asking that you please deny her parole today. And hopefully in the future, but specifically today. Not let her out. I miss them very much. And I love them very much. And I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that their death doesn't go in vain. Thank you.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then you see this comment here, which this almost made me lose it. The boys were found holding hands. That's beyond the pale. But Gigi, you said you know people that know David Smith. I mean, it just seems like just a super sincere, honest man. But Notorious Jules here, this is a broken man. This is not a man that has moved. I mean, he's moved forward to some extent, but his wife did speak to that. But he is definitely, he's been tortured. There's no other way to say it. I wish there was. I think we all feel like we wish there was something we could do. Is there anything we can do, Gigi? I don't know. It's a big question.
No, I think that if he were to venture out on social media tonight or in the next week or two, he's going to see the immense love that people have for him that he's never met and never will. You know, one thing for me when he first, when they first showed him on camera today, he didn't have to say a word, because everything that we felt emotionally coming out as he talked, we already saw that just in his face. And, you know, I think people learn to grow around their grief. You know, you can get stuck and spin your wheels with the unimaginable of losing two sons at the hand of the very woman that birthed them. But I think that, you know, at least he has found love and has had two beautiful kids. But Michael and Alex will always be this core part of his life, or the elephant in the room. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but it's always got to be just right there. And to have to face this in a legal, you know, building of law today, had to just bring up from the moment she said they were missing through that trial, everything he had to sit and hear about his boy's last moments. You know, but I just think he is so strong. And, you know, like I say, if we all could find David tonight and give him a big hug, he'd have a very long line of people that just want to say, hey, man, we love you. We don't know you, but we love you. And everything I've heard about him, just a good guy, sincere, and very soft-spoken. You know, one thing that always stood out to me is in the videos before we found out what happened to Michael and Alex, he almost had a deer in the headlight look. the entire time he was on camera, just disbelief of this is my life. These are my boys. That always stood out to me as opposed to the fake tears with her. One parent was genuinely in grief and the other wasn't. But what a strong man. And I think those of us who haven't experienced this horrific trauma can learn something from him, which is perseverance. And maybe on the days where you just think you can't get out of bed, you get out of bed because somebody out there is dealing with something way worse every single moment than we are, sometimes with problems that we make so big, but really aren't nothing to write home about when you compare it to somebody like David Smith.
Yeah, very, very well said, Gigi, because I'm whining to myself today about a lot of things. So you just put me in check. From Mossberg Mom to Dr. Rhodes. This is important, I think.
Yeah.
Mossberg Mom,
She said, "Put on your big kid pants." Now let's move on.
She says, I always felt like if I moved, she says, and she lost her husband to a murder, Raj. I always felt like if I moved on, I was betraying my husband. This is going to be, if you're a therapist, someone's going to come into your office and they're going to say, Dr. Rhodes, I can't believe it. My husband was murdered. How do I move on? I'm betraying him. What kind of advice do you give them?
First, I would have them write down the date of the death of their husband, okay, and say, "This was life one," okay. And if you need to, as long as you need to grieve life one, okay. Now, what we're going to work on therapeutically is life two. And so I'd have them put the date and 1 hour later than the death. And then I would go, what would you like that to look like? What kind of choices would you need to make to have the second life? Because the hard thing about grief is being stuck. That emotionally sticks you. That's the problem with it. You get stuck in the mire of it. And so what you're looking at is giving them a concrete avenue to next and showing them that that's possible. And some people will take that and do that, and some people won't. Some people have the ability to move on, some people don't. And I think it's hard on therapists who are trying to move people where they're not willing to go.
One more question for Sarah Ford, then we'll get final thoughts and we'll wrap it up. It's tough to talk about, but important. One of the things that David Smith said, Sarah Ford, is she has never felt any remorse and she's never expressed any to me. You just said that you're constantly dealing with victims and therefore the perpetrators. You see the other side. What does real remorse look like to you? Because this is obviously not it.
No, this is not it. I think real remorse comes from admitting their guilt, admitting what they've done, admitting that there is no amount of anything they could do that could take back what they've done, but to know that from the moment they wake up in the morning to the minute they go to sleep at night, that they are working towards praying for whatever their higher power is, praying for forgiveness, trying to work through what they can't take back, and admitting to the people who they've really hurt, looking them in the eye and saying, I am so sorry. Those are words, but I think that with you can feel it. Like we could feel, I think Gigi said, you could see, before he said anything, you could see it on his face. You felt his raw emotion and his hurt and just the pain that man has suffered in this lifetime is enough for 10,000 lifetimes for anyone else. And it's just, it's also like, I know it when I see it. And this was definitely not it. What she talked about today was not it. It was not true. It was not, you didn't feel it coming. There was just a genuineness from him that you could just see and feel. And his wife and his daughter and his uncle that spoke. I mean, there was just such a genuineness that as they were speaking about the boys, that you didn't feel from their own mother who gave birth to them. And obviously she murdered those kids in cold blood and walked away. It's just unimaginable. And And, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's what makes this so hard for all of us watching this is it just doesn't, we can't reconcile that. But sometimes forcing our brains to do that can cause us more harm than good.
Dr. Roger Rhodes is a
Yeah.
therapist in private practice in Columbia, South Carolina. He also works with inmates. Raj,
Let me jump in with one word for all that. You ready, Joel?
Yes, sir.
Gut check. Gut check. That's what we're talking about. Here's a person
that might
who
be a
works with
hyphenated
that.
word. That might be two words, Raj.
You can't explain through words a gut check that lets you you can feel it. It's visceral. It's right there, but you can't put it in word terms. But there's a gut check of, is this genuine or is this contrived? And I think you heard very clearly who fit each category.
Very well said. I'm just looking up gut check. It's two words, Raj. It is not one word. So I am right about that, Raj. It is two words.
Check. How's that?
Jenny Allison, to Raj, you sound like a fantastic psychiatrist, psychologist, and any and all of your patients are lucky to have you. We need more proven trauma-based help in this country. Raj, you get any accolades here? Your final thoughts on this very depressing story, Dr. Raj?
Help the helpable. Help the helpable.
Raj, you got to write a book. This guy, he reminds me so much of my dad. My dad had very simple aphorisms, if that's the right word. And Raj reminds me of that a lot. And I'm working on a new book, Surviving the Psychiatrist. So I'm hoping to share some of that wisdom. Sarah Ford.
Joel, and the bottom line is, and I know the ladies on this show know also, it's not the prolific, it's the concise that makes it doable by people who want to get it done.
I love that. The help the helpable. I like that. I like that a lot. Ruth Markel always says,
do the doable. That's really what all the people on this show are doing. They're trying to help people do the doable. They're not trying to erase the reality of things. They're just trying to say, well, given this stuff, what can they do to get it done?
Dr. Raj, did you grow up in a dirt road? Because my daddy always said, I'm from South Carolina, and I've used that in a truck. Hey, I grew up in a dirt road, but I love it. Like, it's just, there's a genuineness from you. It's like, these are just the things. These are the nugs.
I'm just nuggets. I grew up in a dirt road state. So that would tell you that. And I've just come here and found the right woman. And she told me when I married her, we weren't leaving. Well, she was right.
Look at this question, Dr. Raj. Do you do telehealth? I'm getting you patients now. I want 20% of everything. Do you do telehealth if people want to reach out to you, Raj?
I work for BetterHelp, and they need to contact me through BetterHelp, and I'd be more than glad to talk to them.
There you go. BetterHelp.com. I think it's helping change the world. Sarah Ford, she served as legal director at the South Carolina Victims Assistance since 2017. She advocates, of course, for exactly that, for victims. She was kind enough to come on and kind of break down the parole hearing, and she's back to give us her thoughts. Your final thoughts. It was a heavy day. I can't believe we're doing one more show tonight, but it'll be an interesting show. Sarah, your final thoughts.
I think it's important for us to recognize what we saw today. I mean, we saw what our justice system looks like 3 decades after their conviction, that it's still ongoing, that justice is not we often think, someone pled guilty or they're going to prison and let's close the chapter. It doesn't ever end for crime victims and survivors. And I think it's a good reminder to all of us who have kind of been catapulted back 30 years to seeing Susan Smith with those fake tears on the Today Show, and then seeing her fake tears today at that parole hearing. We're catapulted back to there, but we see what's happened and how things are so difficult for victims to move forward, and how there's not a day that goes by that these victims aren't dealing with this. And thinking about the victims we know in our own life, the victims and survivors, we all know victims and survivors, whether they've told you they're a victim or they've been a survivor, we know them and we interact with them all day. So just being mindful of being supportive and kind and understanding, and not always trying to fix things. Sometimes just listening and letting someone be heard can be the most valuable thing you can give to a survivor.
That is amazing advice. I'm glad you just gave it. Gigi McKelvey, she is host of the very popular true crime podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis, with one of the best names. She's covered it all. She's on the road. Hopefully we'll be on the road together covering some trials in 2025. I cannot believe it's almost 2025. Gigi, you live in the Palmetto State. This is where it happened. You've been to the lake. Your final thoughts tonight. You're muted, so you got to unmute because we'll be devastated.
Just testing your lip reading skills right now, as I always do when I'm muted. Today for me was just a reminder that things don't change, and people like Susan Smith clearly don't change, and the weight of the grief that family, especially their father, Michael, feels doesn't change. And so for me, doing what I do is just another little shot in the arm of adrenaline to keep the focus on the victims and the victims' families, because that's really why we do what we do, is to tell their stories and to keep them at the front. And man, just a powerful day. I don't think a word of anything that Michael and his family and friends could have said that would have been any more impactful than what they did. And it came from the heart. And so comparing that to her on the screen with the tissue, it was worlds away. But then again, nothing's changed. Just the times and fortunately he's moved on, but and has children and a wife. So thank goodness for that. And I hope that he continues to find his peace, however he can find that.
Very well said. And David Smith's wife said that she stood by him for the last 30 years and will continue to do so. She talked about dark days that you cannot imagine. And as a loving wife, it was tough to watch him suffer. Some days he could not get out of bed. And she went on, and it was tough, but it's, as Gigi just said, it's good that she obviously is in his life. Always good for a man to have a strong woman, and this is no exception. A really heavy show. Like them a little lighter, but it is what it is. Coming in 2025 too is going to be a cool second channel where we're bringing a lot of best guests on to host some of their own shows. More on that down the road, but it's going to be cool. We hope it's going to be a ton of work, but it will be cool, I hope. And we're coming back in 40 minutes. Suzanne Simpson, she's a missing mother of 4, presumed dead, and her husband charged with her murder. We've got the former district attorney from Bexar County, Bexar, San Antonio, in that area. And we've got Dr. Lenore Walker, who wrote Battered Women's Syndrome. So a couple of amazing guests on the next show, and another big-time Texas attorney. Hello from Turkey, lest you think we are not an international show. We are indeed. Hello to Turkey. Love you, Turkey. Love you, America. Love you, South Carolina. Michael and Alex, we will not forget you. Everybody, I don't know, do something nice tonight for somebody. How about that? See you at 7 o'clock.